Recording. So hi everybody, this is Joe Maldonado from Griffin's Claw, the School of Practical Magic, and I have with us today Professor Deb Krause, who is the department head of herbology, and she is actually talking to us from the mountains of the Carolinas. So signal may not always be the super duper kind, but we do have audio and we do have visual. Hi Deb.
Hi, Joe. Hi, everybody.
So if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do in the magical world of herbs.
So I know that somebody mentioned they're from Orlando. I live in Orlando. We're up here in the mountains of North Carolina because this is my love. I love, love, love being up here. So we're actually building a home up here to move to. I have spent some time recently. These woods are where a lot of my my love herbs are. This is where a lot of our healing herbs grow. And so I've been really excited. I've been here for the past few weeks, and I've been actually going on some hikes and harvesting a little bit of things that are in abundance right now, things that I have not even harvested before. But a lot of the herbs that I'm working with up here are herbs that also grow in Florida. So I can go a little bit back and forth. My history is I got a degree in environmental studies back in the early 90s and didn't really, work with it in that way. And then recently, the past 7-8 years, or I think about 7 years, I started learning herbalism at the Florida School of Holistic Living in Orlando, or Winter Park. And that was a journey that just really changed my life. Okay, that was when I learned that herbs and plants are truly magic. To me, they were just truly magic. And I went through the roots of herbalism, the family herbalist, and then the community herbalism courses, and kind of developed what I really enjoy. I love working with the plants, hands-on. I love making, I have a salve that I make. I have different salves that I make, tinctures, teas, all sorts of things. I just really like having my hands in the medicine. I love teaching about these plants. I love people who haven't really been familiar with them before because I didn't grow up. I mean, a lot of people grew up working with the plants, right? Their grandmother would go out in the woods and get something and make a tea or something else out of it and use it in that way. I did not grow up that way. I grew up in suburbia, Wonder Bread, microwaves, and so all of this to me was relatively new. But I feel the connection that is there in each of us. My very favorite thing is to teach people who don't necessarily come from that background and make them aware that these plants are here. They're here not for us to use, they're here more as allies. Okay, because we are with the spirit of these plants as well. There are plants that I'll go out there and I'm not going to harvest them because I have just such reverence for them that just sitting with them is the medicine. So that's kind of where we are right now, a little bit of my background.
Yeah, and actually Deb and I met at Rollins. She was teaching a course on herbs at Rollins College in Winter Park. And I was teaching animal communication at Rollins College, and we just kind of bumped into each other. And I took her class because I was interested in herbs, and that's all she wrote. I'm like, herbs, yes, I'm in. So if I can ask you, and this is, I know we have certain questions that we're going to address today, but is there a difference in the strength or the quality of a plantain, for example, that you pick over in the Carolinas versus that which you would find here in Orlando?
So I guess the way I would look at that, and the way I look at some things, is when you're wild harvesting, wild crafting is what we call it, you are going to get there's going to be some differences. And they're going to be minute. And a lot of what it is the intention. in all honesty. Like, I would absolutely take a plantain from the Carolinas that I'm wildcrafting here, and a plantain that I'm either wildcrafting or that's just growing in my garden in Orlando. I am going to work with both of them equally. And a lot of it is your intention, your prayerful intention of what this medicine is, what this medicine is going to be geared towards. So I'm not going to say, if you're working with a plant that's coming from the wild, right? They are using these constituents. They're putting out constituents like, say, rosemary, right? You can smell rosemary, or mint. You can smell rosemary and mint. When it's being carefully cultivated, it's not really fighting off the bugs and things that can attack it. In the wild, they have a lot more stressors. And I'm not saying stress your plants out, you know what I mean? Don't be mean to your plants. But in the wild, they put off chemicals that help to keep these bugs away. So the things that you're smelling, like the aromatics in mint and rosemary and even the plantain and whatnot, they're putting out these things that help us, but it's meant to help the plants to fight off the things that come at them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess I know it's two different things, but I'm just thinking about wolves that are in the wild, you know, and how their immune system gets built up because they have to deal with the hot and the cold and, you know, and other environmental elements, and how they're a lot more hardier and sturdier than our dogs who were, you know, say grew up in New York City in an apartment and go out once in a while for a walk. I know, no offense to anybody in New York, but I'm just saying. So is that similar to what you're saying, that they're a little bit more, they got to fight off a lot more, so they're maybe a little bit more potent out in the Carolinas in the wild?
Sure, they're producing these chemicals, these constituents that we are many times trying to access from the plant.
Mm-hmm.
So they're producing more of it if they are under stress than if they are being coddled and being, you know, like in the dog terms, like if you have a purse Pomeranian that you're, you know, carrying around who sleeps only on the finest pillows, you know, that might not have quite the oomph that you're going to get from the wolf that's here in the woods. So yeah, I mean, it would have a little bit stronger, but again, I'm not going to use one more than the other, although I personally am so super excited to be up here, to be able to work with these plants and to learn more about them. And a lot of it is sitting with the plants and witnessing the plants, and how do they grow? You know, how do they reproduce? When you're actually learning each thing, it's not just a this for that, right? It's not just I'm going to give you plantain because you have a bug bite. You know, you're learning how to work with the plants in their own terms. And that's really super exciting to me.
And so I'm going to go a little bit, you know, off what we were going to talk about, and just because I'm really fascinated with this. What if you were to take the seeds of a wild plant and plant it in your garden? Does that plant, therefore, that's growing, would that be sturdier than the one that you planted from your garden?
Okay. To be honest with you, I mean, in my head, in Deb's head, I would think that a lot of that wild DNA is still going to be in that plant, and there's a possibility of that. Although if I'm taking a plant from North Carolina and bringing it to Florida, it may not grow there. You know what I mean? The plantain that I'm working with up here is Plantago Major, and they've also got a lot of Plantago lanceolata, which is two different types. They both do grow in Florida, but Plantago Major in Orlando, you're not going to find it wild as much as you might find some, but we have a smaller, like Plantago virginica in Orlando that's a different species, a little bit different than the other two. They will both grow there perfectly well, and the lanceolata grows great in Florida. but the major tends to be just a little bit north of Orlando.
Okay.
So if you're going from one region to another, you might have some difficulties with growing. If I was up here and I was to take that wild plantain, which I do, I collect the seeds all the time, and put it in my garden up here, I would think it would do great. You know what I mean? I don't think that there would be much difference in that.
Right. So you mentioned tinctures and salves and poultices. Can you explain each of those three and how they differ in preparation and strength too?
Okay, so
Tincture.
so if you've known me for 5 minutes, you know that plantain is my very favorite herb. Okay,
Absolutely.
it's my very first herbal ally. So I'm gonna explain all of them using plantain as the example. So if I am out and I get bit by something, okay, I am going to, and I will do this in my garden too, because I grow plantain in my garden. I will go out and I will take a piece of the fresh plant from the garden. I will chew it up and use it as what we call a spit poultice. Okay. And I have done this many times. My husband does this. What really drew me to plantain and what really drew me to herbalism a lot is that I get bit by everything. Okay, every single thing bites me, and then I have a ridiculous reaction to it. I mean, just it'll swell up. I'll get blisters. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So plantain, when I first learned about it, I learned that it has a drawing capability. Like it can help to draw the venom, or, you know, if it's a mosquito bite or whatever they're injecting, it can help to draw the nastiness out. And then it also helps to keep it from getting infected. It just does all these wonderful things. So if I do a spit poultice, take a poultice and I just put it on there, I can attach it with a Band-Aid. In some cases, you can use marshmallow root powder, and that helps to bind it just a little bit. So that will also help to keep it on the skin. And then you can keep it bound up a little bit. If you have a wasp sting or something like that, that's what this spit poultice to me really helps with. So
would you chew it up and then just leave it on there?
I would chew it up until it starts to dry up a little bit. Okay. And it depends, and then you can replace it. And so that is how I would do a poultice. You can also use dried and then reconstitute it with water if you want to do that, and do the same thing as a poultice. Okay, so that's just using the plant material and wetting it either with spit or with water, and then applying it to your whatever your affliction might be. If you have any kind of an open wound, I would probably put gauze between the plant material and the open wound. If you're working with something like that, like I'm not talking about a wound, I'm talking about more like a scrape or something, something that's not wide open. You just don't want plant material inside of there. So that's a poultice. Is everybody pretty clear on that one? Yeah. Okay. So next we'll do like a tincture. Okay. Plantain also works great internally as a tincture or a tea. I might do it more as a tea, but I like having tinctures just for its preservation capabilities. So if I'll do a tea first and then a tincture. So if I'm gonna do a tea with plantain, right, it just kind of helps. It can help with GI issues. It can help with colon type issues. It can help with lung issues. It can be used as a proper expectorant to help expectorate when you've got junk in your lungs. Right. So if I'm gonna use it as a tea, I'll do it just as a like a proper tea, or a tisane is what we call it. Tea is usually reserved for Camellia sinensis, I believe. So I would go ahead and put some in a cup or a quart jar, and then I will add hot water to it. I will let it steep covered for a little while, 15, 20, 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, depending on how severe you got. And then I will drink that. That will help it with some of that internal junk that's going on, okay? For a tincture, generally I do tinctures with alcohol. Now you can do a tincture either with alcohol, you can do it with glycerin, which is non-alcoholic. You can also do it with apple cider vinegar is another way that you can make a tincture. And they do different things. So I want you to think about the constituents that you're looking for in whatever herb it is that you're drawing things out of. Some things need to be drawn out with alcohol, like resins tend to be, they want to be drawn out with alcohol, like high proof alcohol. Mm-hmm. You've got also, you've got minerals are very good at being extracted with vinegars. Okay, if you're looking for the calciums and magnesium, that sort of thing with vinegars. And glycerin, it doesn't extract quite as well as alcohol. You need to do a little bit more work to get the extraction from a glycerin, but a lot of people are looking for something that is non-alcoholic for whatever reasons. You know what I mean? There might be a number of different reasons why you don't want alcohol in your tinctures. Right. So those are the reasons for that. Alcohol preserves the herbs and the constituents for a good while. Mm-hmm. So some tinctures, alcohol tinctures, they can last for a really long time, like years. Mm-hmm. Whereas like a vinegar tincture, you know, you're going to be needing to check it in months rather than years. A tea is not going to last very long. You're looking at a couple of days on a tea, mm-hmm. right? You can smell when teas start to go off, and teas will go off. A water preservation will go off a little quicker. Yeah.
So I just have a quick question on the tea part. Okay, so if I wanted to make my plantain tea, I can just cut the leaves that I'm growing in my kitchen, okay, from the plantain. Yep. Do I need to mush them up?
I would mush them up. Okay. I would bruise them really good. You want to open, you want a little bit more surface area. So you want to cut and mush if you can. If you have a mortar and pestle, you can do that. Yep. I'm never against zapping stuff for a couple of seconds in the NutriBullet either. A lot of my students, before I prepare them, I'm not looking to powder them necessarily, but I'll just zap them for a second just to get a little more surface area to be able to extract from.
And how do you know how many leaves to put in, like say for, you know, a cup or a container, or, you know, I have a little infuser so big. How do you know how much to put in there when you're making your tea?
If I'm using fresh, I'm probably going to fill up the container myself, probably about a good bit. I'm probably going to fill it up maybe a quarter of the way up. If I'm using dried, I'm not going to quite fill it up that full. Okay. Because that's already got, the fresh already has water in it. Okay. So that's how I kind of gauge it. If I'm doing dried, I'm going to do, if you're doing per cup, I'm going to do 1 to 3 teaspoons per cup. Unless you want it really strong, then it's going to be up to you, you know, how you like it.
Right. Thank you for that. And then the next one would be salves. What is a salve?
Okay. So a salve, you've got your herb, you've got an oil, and plantain is my #1 ingredient in my salves. You've got your plant, you've got your oil, which I use olive oil. I just use olive oil for most everything. It's accessible. It's not overly greasy. It's, you know, there are things that are a little bit less oily, like sweet almond oil, things like that. You've got a little bit more, which would be like avocado oil. But I really like olive oil because it's accessible, it's affordable, and it's perfectly fine for what I'm doing. I usually look for organic. If you can't find organic, use the best of what you can get. You know, that's all I want to offer for that. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to infuse my plant into the oil. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to, and that may take 4 weeks or so to infuse it into the oil. I might put it in a little bit of sunlight to get a little tiny bit of that good solar, little bit of heat extraction. And then I'm just going to let it set. I'm going to shake it up some and let it set. I'm going to have it covered in a mason jar. Once that oil is ready, then I can you can do it a number of ways. I can just use the oil, which is what I do. There's what I call elbow grease, and that's for joints, okay? That I leave in an oil. I like to just use that in an oil. Mm-hmm. if I'm going to have something that I want to take on the road with me, I'm going to use it in a salve. So in order to make the salve, I'm just taking my infused oil. I've already strained it really good. For a tincture, I might not strain quite as thoroughly as I do in oil because I'm taking that internally and via the dropper. But for a salve, I'm going to strain everything out because you don't really want plant material kind of rubbing on your body. It's kind of like rubbing, sandpaper on your offending appendage. So, so for that, I'm going to add beeswax, basically a quarter of the amount in beeswax. There are other waxes that you can use. I haven't really worked with other waxes. I'm pretty much a beeswax proponent.
Okay.
I will also add things like coconut oil. I actually do half of the infused oil and then half coconut oil. And then I'll add the beeswax to that. And that'll be just a quarter of the total amount will be beeswax.
Right.
So, and then I'll let that, get that going. And I'm just melting and warming at that point. Okay. I'm not really making things. I'm just melting things together and then I'll pour it into the container. When you see lip balms, people are always asking, well, how did you get that in that container like that? Well, it was liquid. So right. I poured it into the lip balm container or the tin or the glass. Mm-hmm. For lip balms, I tend to use a little bit more beeswax because I want it to be hard enough to be able to use and not to be able to melt all over in your pockets and stuff.
Right. We have a question. How do you dry to keep the most oil in any herb, and do you pick at any particular time of the day?
So it just so happens that I have some things here that I have dried, and we had a little bit of an issue with the exposure. So I'm going to try to show you all this. So let me see if this will come out. Hold on one second. Okay. You guys can maybe see it. It's not great. I'm trying to adjust the exposure. Anyway, this is plantain, and I'll show you one close up. Okay. Mm-hmm. Can you see that?
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of. So
yeah, it's a darkish outline, but I know what it is.
Yeah, this is dried. I'm drying right now. This is yarrow, which is also, you probably can't see that very well. This is also called Achillea millefolium. And I got a bunch of the lovely flowers with it. See those. And then I also got a little bit of red clover. So the plantain, I'm going to just use this one for an example. So you can do it in a number of ways. I want to just show you an identifying feature of plantain though. You can see that the ribs kind of run parallel from stem to stern. That's just one of the features. I'm not saying no other plants have this, but that's one identifying feature. And you can see these are drying. It's super duper humid up here. So it doesn't dry quite as well as it does like in Orlando in the air conditioning, but it is drying. When it's finished drying, see, it's still a little bit pliable. It'll be very crispy. You can dry it in a dehydrator. I don't have a dehydrator. I have some screens that I have in Orlando. And like I said, with the air conditioning, it dries pretty well. And what you're looking for when you're getting herbs or drying herbs or whatever, you're wanting the herbs to be roughly the same color that they are when you have harvested them. Okay? Yeah. When you go to a shop, say you're getting mint. We use this as an example a lot. Say you're getting mint and you look at the mint, it's usually in these plastic bags or it could be in a jar or whatever. You want to look at it, right? Does it still have that vibrancy to it? You want to smell it. Can you smell that mint in there? You know what I mean? So you're using your own what's called organoleptics. This is using your eyes, your smell, your taste, your touch. How are you getting the features of it? So once this is dried, it's going to be similar to how it was when I picked it. And then myself personally, I leave it whole until I am ready to work with it. And then I'll zap it in the NutriBullet, you know, or if I'm going to use it right away in a tinctures, I like working with fresh plants. I really like, I went and made some yarrow tincture. Like I took it from the woods and I put it right into a jar with some alcohol, and I've got a nice yarrow tincture. And so you can dehydrate it in a dehydrator. If you have a super low setting on your oven, you can use that to dry it out a little bit. You don't want to put it directly in the hot sun in Florida. That's just going to burn it, and it's going to turn brown. It's going to turn dark brown like right away. And so that's kind of how I do my drying.
Right. So I wanted to segue. I know we have a couple questions, but I wanted to ask you, herbs for colds and herbs for viruses right around this time. What is your recommendation for herbs for colds and herbs for viruses?
There's a lot to that, Joe.
I know.
So,
that's like a whole class, right?
yeah. So in herbalism, there are things that you can do like a this for that, but we don't look at herbs in the same way as a this for that, right? It's not like, oh, you have a cold or I have a cold, what do I take? Because you're going to have different symptoms that you're trying to work with. And I want to make it clear to everybody here that we do not treat, cure, diagnose, or prescribe. And this is very important. I want to make this super clear. And if I was to recommend something to somebody, I would need to know if you have a cough, what kind of a cough do you have, right? Because if you have a very dry cough, first thing I'm probably going to recommend is marshmallow. In a cold infusion, marshmallow root. That will moisten your lungs, right? We're looking at how we're working with the tissues, not we're trying to cure a cold, okay? Right. So I'm going to, if I have really a bunch of stuck junk in my lungs that I can feel, but it's not productive, I'm going to want an herb that will expectorate, an expectorant herb. So the plantain, my favorite, that will help to expectorate. Also the marshmallow will help to moisten and expectorate. You know, those couple of things. There are also a host of other things. If I have something that's viral, or if there's a virus going around, say, let's just pretend there is a virus going around. So there are some things that we would want to do in advance to boost our immunity. But I would need to also talk to you about this, because if I am going to suggest, say, elderberry, right? Elderberry syrup is a great helper of boosting the immunity. However, you might have a condition, you might have an autoimmune condition that I am not going to recommend elderberry or echinacea to you, because it can jack up it's boosting your immunity. So your immunity is already boosted, right? You don't want to boost it more. I learned that with echinacea myself. I have a little bit of arthritis, okay, in my hands. And I took echinacea because I was feeling a cold coming on. And I had never put the two together, but my hand, I could barely move. So this is why there are things that are great for these things, but you'd have to know which person you're working with.
I am so glad you said that. I have been taking elderberry syrup and had an RA flare. And I'm thinking, what am I doing differently? But I usually put some in my water. And that is it's so important that we know what we're doing.
And this is why I can't say, yeah, you got a cold, here, do this. You got, you got a virus, do this. You need to, if you're working with an herbalist or whatever, that herbalist is going to probably spend a couple of hours with you to figure out something that is going to help you and not harm you. First, do no harm. And that is what I always abide by. So I'm going to always be on the side of, You know, you can be toxic or tonic. I'm always going to be closer to the tonic end, things that you can do that are not going to cause you any further harm.
Excellent. So excellent. Another question, have you ever used calendula flowers to make an ointment?
Oh my goodness. That's my third ingredient in my salve.
I love calendula.
Calendula is fantastic. Calendula is fantastic in oils and salves, externally, internally. It just has a number of remarkable healing qualities. I'm a huge fan of calendula, and that's all I got to say about that.
Now, can we grow calendula?
I can't. I've tried.
I've tried too. It doesn't work very well.
I've heard of people who can. It's more of a northern kind of thing. It's not really an Orlando thing. I know people who can. I've seen it done. I'm not that person.
Yeah, it's like lavender. Lavender is not that easy
Not for me.
to grow either. So unfortunately, we're out of time. Everybody, Deb will be teaching a full-length class in herbology and all this great stuff that we just touched upon in December. So do check our website, griffinsclawschoolofmagic.com, and see all the great classes we have, but in particular, the one that she'll be teaching. I'm going to stop recording, but ask everybody to stay on the line. And what we usually do, we can ask open microphone questions, and which is not recorded. So stop recording. And for the recording, say thank you, everybody, for joining us.